Hello, welcome. Today is the final part of Snow White in B1 English. Now, the Queen knows where Snow White lives. Will she find her? Will she destroy her? She dresses as an old woman and walks to Snow White's house with a deadly gift. Last week's podcast was part 1. One key vocabulary is corset. A corset is a piece of clothing. Women wear corsets. A corset is tightened around a woman's chest to make her look thinner and more attractive. Okay, let's begin. The Queen made a beautiful corset. She brought it to the dwarves' house in her disguise. The dwarves were at work, and Snow White was all alone. This was the Queen's chance. The old woman knocked on the door and said, "Pretty things for sale." Snow White looked out the window. The old woman showed her the corset. "You can try it on," she said. For a moment, Snow White remembered the dwarf's warning. However, she really wanted to try the corset. She opened the door. The old woman walked in. "It will fit you perfectly," she said. "Your voice, it sounds familiar," said Snow White. No, laughed the old woman. "Us elderly all sound the same to the young." She went behind Snow White and put the corset on her. As she tightened it, Snow White felt uncomfortable. It got tighter and tighter. Snow White's chest hurt. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She couldn't breathe. The room started to spin. "Help!" Snow White thought, but couldn't say it. She fainted onto the floor. The old woman quickly left. The dwarves came home and found Snow White unconscious. Her face was blue. They cut the corset to help her breathe again. "Thank goodness we found you in time. Be more careful," they begged. "From now on, nobody is allowed in the house while we're gone." The Queen made a new plan. She made a beautiful, shiny apple. But half the apple had poison in it. One bite would make Snow White sleep forever. The Queen went back to the dwarves' house. This time she was disguised as a poor peasant. She stood outside the cottage and said, "Hello, pretty girl. Apples for sale." "I'm sorry, I can't let anyone in," said Snow White through the window. "That's okay, dear," said the peasant. "But look at this beautiful apple. It's so red and juicy." She showed it to the princess. It sparkled. It looked too perfect. "I'll have one bite, and you have the rest," she said. The peasant took a bite, then gave it to Snow White. "For you, dear, a gift." Snow White reached out the window and took the apple. It smelled so sweet. She lifted it to her mouth. Then she hesitated. Suddenly, there were voices in the distance. The dwarves came home early. "Hurry, dear," said the peasant. "It's the sweetest thing you'll ever taste." Snow White thought, "She already ate half. One bite can't hurt." As Snow White bit it, a sinister cold went into her bones. Her vision blurred. She tried focusing on the old woman's face, who was now smiling cruelly. In that moment, she saw behind the disguise the hate-filled eyes of the queen. Then Snow White collapsed and everything went dark. The dwarves saw the peasant running away. They rushed back to the house.
Quick note, the full story of Snow White in 13 languages and a bonus story is available as an e-book. Link in the episode description.
The dwarves ran inside, calling Snow White's name. The only sound was an apple rolling across the floor, where she lay. "Snow White!" they cried out. "Wake up!" They shook her, but Snow White lay still. Her skin was cold and her lips blue. This time they couldn't save her. The dwarves sat around her with tears falling. "We couldn't keep her safe," said one dwarf. Another dwarf held her cold hand. "She was our sunshine," he whispered. For many days, the dwarves stayed by Snow White's side, neither eating nor sleeping. "Wake up! Please wake up!" they begged, but she didn't move. The forest fell silent without her cheerful voice. Even the birds stopped singing. Her funeral was in the forest. All the dwarves and animals who loved her came. They didn't bury her because she was too beautiful. Instead, they put her in a glass coffin. They put the coffin in a peaceful meadow. Every day they visited her. Nobody could believe she was gone. One day, a prince rode through the meadow on his horse. He saw the glass coffin with the dwarves and animals around it. His horse stopped. The prince got off and looked closer. When he saw Snow White, his heart beat faster. "Who is she?" he asked the dwarves. "This is Snow White," they said. "She was poisoned by an evil queen and now sleeps forever." The prince recognized the kind girl. He used to play hide and seek with her as a child. And now she was even more beautiful than before. "She'll be safer in my castle," the prince said. "Let me take her. I'll pay anything." "She's not for sale," said the dwarves. "Not for all the gold in the world." "Then please give her to me," said the prince, "and I'll break this spell, even if I have to go to the ends of the earth." These words gave the dwarves hope. They agreed he could take her. The prince's servants carried Snow White's coffin to his castle. On the way, one of the servants tripped on a tree root. The coffin shook. Snow White's body moved, and the piece of apple in her throat came out. Snow White's blue lips turned red. Her eyes opened. "Where am I?" Snow White thought, confused. "The last thing I remember is an apple." She knocked loudly on the inside of the coffin. The men couldn't believe their ears. "Stop!" the prince shouted. He took off the lid. Their eyes met and widened with excitement. Snow White recognized the prince from her childhood. Now he was much more handsome than before. She sat up and waved her hair. She fluttered her eyelids. "Where am I?" She smiled. The prince gently lifted her out the coffin. The two talked for many hours, riding on the prince's horse. Snow White said, "I remember we used to play hide and seek in the prince said, "Royal gardens." "Yes, behind the big tree." They finished each other's sentences. They shared stories and laughed together all the way back to the castle. News of Snow White's return spread quickly. The dwarves ran to see her. She hugged them all and invited them to her wedding. The dwarves stayed to help prepare for the wedding. Guests were invited from all across the 7 kingdoms. Meanwhile, the queen didn't know Snow White was still alive. She asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror, tell me true. Who's the prettiest of all? Who?" The mirror answered in a nervous voice, "The queen was the prettiest yesterday, but the prince's bride is now, they say." The queen screamed in anger. She threw the mirror across the room, breaking it into hundreds of pieces. She thought, "I must see the prince's bride." She got ready for the wedding. When brushing her hair, she found more grey hairs than usual. She put on her best crown to hide them. She touched the wrinkles in the corners of her eyes. "I can't lose my beauty," she thought. "It's all I have." She put on her most stunning black dress and left. On the wedding day, the castle sparkled with thousands of candles and roses. There was soft music and laughter and reunions between old friends. Snow White was surrounded by all who loved her. Even the forest animals came. She wore her mother's necklace and held it close. Everyone clapped and cheered for the bride and groom. One person did not cheer. When the Queen arrived at the wedding, she pushed through the crowd to see the bride. On seeing Snow White, the Queen's face turned white as a ghost. Snow White was now a queen more beautiful and powerful than her. The Queen snapped. "How dare you?" she shouted in front of everyone. "Your kindness is your weakness. Beauty is my power, and you will not take it from me." Some guests laughed, and others looked at the floor awkwardly. Snow White reached out her hand to help her, but hesitated. Snow White remembered being poisoned the last time she reached out to the Queen. Instead, Snow White held the prince's hand tightly. "Now I'll use my most terrible spell." The Queen raised her hands to the sky, and her hands filled with lightning. The crowd gasped. "I will make you as old as me, so you know how it feels," the Queen cried out. The dwarves quickly made a protective circle around Snow White and the prince. Suddenly, the lightning in the Queen's hands disappeared. For her dark magic was powerless against true love. Instead, the Queen's hair had turned completely white. The crowd burst out laughing. The Queen covered her face, sobbing. "Why won't you just disappear?" The Queen ran to Snow White and grabbed her mother's necklace. But it burned her hands. She screamed and stepped back. The guards grabbed the Queen. "Get your hands off me," she shouted. "I am the Queen's mother. She needs me. I gave her everything." The guards threw the mad woman out the castle into the dirt. Her face was covered in mud. The music resumed and the party continued as if nothing had happened. The Queen walked into the forest in her high heels. She fell over tree roots. Her dress got stuck on branches. Soon she disappeared into the fog and was never seen again. Some say she wandered around the countryside forever, searching for her lost beauty. But she never found true beauty, the beauty of a kind heart. Snow White's father fixed the magic mirror and gave it to his daughter as a wedding gift. Snow White asked a new question. "Mirror, mirror, tell me true. Do our people live in peace and happiness too? The mirror smiled and said, Yes, Your Majesty, very much so. This made Snow White happy. Snow White's kindness was her strength, but she learned kindness doesn't mean being naive. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the Queen looked at her reflection in a lake. She no longer recognized the person staring back at her. Trying to be the prettiest of them all cost her everything. Her kingdom, her family, and her happiness. I could have had a daughter's love, she cried. The end.
Well, a lesson as old as the trees. Trying to have it all cost her everything. Destroyed by her own ego. Well done for improving your English with me today. Please share this story and have a beautiful, peaceful week.
Can you understand this podcast, but speaking is still difficult? Try my app, Coffee Chat English. Link is in the notes.